All right, welcome everyone to this open meeting of the Central and Eastern European branch. I'm the Vice Chair. Our Chair can't come today, so I'll be chairing this particular meeting. Some of you know me better as the Labour International Communications Officer. I'll introduce some others from our branch. Jade McEwen is our Secretary and also our LGBT+ officer. Andrew Ryder is a member of our branch based in Budapest, I think. Are you still there, Andrew? Yes. And he has a lot of experience working on Roma and Traveller issues. So he was the main person who set up this meeting. So thank you, Andrew, for that. It should be very interesting. So I think we have 4 speakers. We have actually 5 speakers. We have one surprise speaker who wasn't on the list. And we have Andy Slaughter, who is the MP for Hammersmith and Shepherd's Bush. We have Katalin Rostas, who's from Hungary. She's a Roma activist, originally from Hungary, but now studying for an MA in Vienna. And we have Nicu Stoica, who's originally from Romania, but now living in Newcastle, and he's actually running in the local elections for the Labour Party. And he does various other kinds of activism. And Dr. Marius Taba, who's also from Romania, he's based in Doncaster at the moment, I think working for the NHS, is that right? And we just have a surprise guest, Semran from Macedonia. Welcome everyone. So I'm going to ask Jade to introduce our first speaker, Andy Slaughter MP.
Hello everybody. Andy Slaughter MP has a long-standing interest in Gypsy, Roma and Traveller issues. And he's Vice Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Gypsy, Roma and Traveller issues. He's going to tell us something about Labour Party policy in this area and also about current issues facing the GRT community. Andy, if you'd like to talk to us, please.
Indeed. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Right. Thank you, first of all, very much for inviting me. First time I've spoken to this group of people. It's an interesting new experience. But hearing you've got 5 speakers, I will slightly curtail my remarks, I think, because otherwise, usually one of the best parts of these sort of sessions is answering questions. So I'm happy to answer questions on whatever you want me to, but I will do a quick whistle-stop tour through my brief, which is, as you've just heard, essentially to talk about where we are on Gypsy Travel Roma rights in the UK, what the current Conservative government is doing, because there's a new piece of legislation on that, and how the Labour Party is responding, what the Labour Party would do instead. You have my brief biog. It'll actually be 35 years next month since I was first elected as a councillor in West London, and I was an MP since 2005. But my interest in Gypsy and travel issues really dates from when I was a practicing lawyer. I haven't practiced criminal law for nearly 20 years, but I used to represent a lot of Gypsy and traveller clients through solicitors who instructed me, and got to know some communities there and got to know about the sort of discrimination they were suffering at the time. So when I got into Parliament, I joined the group, which I am now vice chair of. They're called all party groups. We try and get a bigger cross section of the different political interests, from right to left, involved, although I don't think it'd be any secret to this audience that it is rather easier to get Labour and the other opposition parties involved than it is to get the Conservatives involved. I've had a few Conservatives who have been brilliant on Gypsy and traveller issues, but that's more to do with the individuals, I fear, and as a party, their record is pretty appalling. But having said that, when I first got elected, it's the last 5 years of Labour governments, and most of what we did, the person in charge of the group then was Julie Morgan, who was the wife of MP for Cardiff and the wife of the First Minister of Wales. and she was very interested and knowledgeable about Gypsy and Traveller, not necessarily all political issues, but in terms of culture, in terms of education. And it now looks like halcyon days then that we spent most of our time bringing Gypsies and Travellers into the House of Commons, getting them to trying to get other MPs to meet, trying to have more informed but informal sessions celebrating Gypsy and Traveller lifestyles. Meanwhile, the Labour government was making slow but progress in the right direction towards ensuring that there was more provision, particularly of sites for Gypsies and Travellers in the UK. And I haven't got time to do all the history, but some people will possibly know that although obviously Gypsies and Travellers have been part of UK life since at least the early 16th century, it was only in 1968 the Labour government then introduced through the Caravan Site Act the requirement of local authorities to provide sites for Gypsies and Travellers, and then only less than 30 years later, in 1994, the Conservative government withdrew those rights and instead introduced a penal system of enforcement against any unlawful encampments that were set up. So we've had since the mid 1990s really quite harsh legislation directed at Gypsies and Travellers in the UK, and yet we sort of look back on those first few years I was in Parliament as relatively benign days, and I think we would have if we had another Labour government after 2010, because there was a growing momentum towards getting over the barriers. Because if you leave it to individual councils to provide facilities for Gypsies and Travellers, on the whole, some are very good, most of them are very bad, and that's because they have pressure through the media, through local groups and so on and so forth, not to provide permanent sites, usually by the same people who object to unauthorised encampments, and that becomes a vicious circle. But certainly after 2010, things did not go well. There was a very well-known site called Dale Farm in Essex, the biggest Gypsy and Traveller site by far in the UK, land owned by Gypsies and Travellers, but without planning consent, where there was a mass clearance by police, a very violent clearance, and that in 2011, and that really set the tone for the way the Conservative government responded. And we've had really since then a sort of onslaught, and it's been partly through politicians, mainly, but I'm afraid to say not exclusively Conservative politicians. Some Labour politicians and others are not very good on these issues. So I'm fed up with the number of times I have to take part in debates in Parliament where Tory MPs just come along to moan and groan about this particular encampment or something else to please a local group in their area. We've had really vicious reporting from the media, and by that I don't just mean the right-wing tabloid press, who are overtly racist, but we've had programs on television like A Big Fat Gypsy Wedding, which have been sort of quite demeaning and insulting towards travellers, done by companies like Channel 4 and Channel 5, who should really know better than that. We've had lots of racist episodes from local communities here and there, and the situation has been very bad. And I suppose what we've tried to do over those last 10 to 15 years is partly to assert an equalities agenda and to try and educate people more about the levels of deprivation that are suffered and racism that are suffered by Roma, Gypsies and Travellers. Because if you look at the indices there, you look at anything from life expectancy to health outcomes to education, Gypsies and Travellers come right at the bottom of any social group, any racial group throughout the UK, and very significantly so. And that is sort of airbrushed over and ignored. And yet we have very good equality legislation. We have the Equality Act, we have the Human Rights Act here, and it's been a struggle, but it's still been a struggle which we've tried to fight our corner since then. The problem since 2015, when the Conservatives got back with the majority, because they were in coalition before that, as you know, is that there's been another attempt, despite the fact, as I say, there is already a hostile environment towards Gypsies and Travellers. There is already quite repressive and draconian legislation. There's been an attempt, this has particularly happened since the current Home Secretary came in, Priti Patel, to produce even more punitive legislation. And that's why this document, rather large document, landed with us a couple of weeks ago, the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill. And again, without going into too much detail there, what that effectively does, it criminalises, for the first time ever in the UK, trespass. So at the moment, if you drive a caravan or whatever you do onto a piece of common land or a piece of private land, you can get a civil injunction to have them removed. You can, if there was violence or some unlawful activity, obviously you can get the police involved with that. But it's not actually a criminal offence. But if and when this bill passes later this year, it will become a criminal offence, punishable by imprisonment, punishable by heavy fines, and by the confiscation of any vehicles, which of course mean travellers, people's homes as well being confiscated. And this is not just unnecessary, it's really vicious and draconian legislation that's being imposed at this time. So we are doing all we can to oppose that. We have on the one hand, we have some really, I say, really nasty examples of racism coming up in the being reported recently. On the positive side, we have some good support. We had about 20 MPs speaking out for Gypsy and Traveller rights in that debate 2 weeks ago, which is the most that I've ever heard in my time in Parliament. We've got some excellent lawyers working for us or on our side, and we've got some fantastic groups like the Traveller Movement and Friends, Families and Travellers. So there is far more of a sense of, if you like, fighting back, arguing, not accepting what the government and others have put forward. So I will end there and on perhaps a slightly positive note, that out of trial and out of being tested can sometimes come a good outcome. I hope that we will get a Labour government in probably 3 years' time, will be the next election. And we're doing all we can to ensure, with our local government teams, Home Office team and so on, that the legislation, not only will we repeal this legislation, but we will introduce legislation that does give those guaranteed rights to Gypsies and Travellers, particularly in terms of permanent sites and transit sites, which allow nomadic ways of life to continue. And the statements I heard from our front bench, i.e. the people who would form who'd be the Home Secretary and the other senior members of the government if we do get elected, were the most positive that I've heard in the time I've been in Parliament in favour of Gypsy Traveller rights. I'm as confident as I can be, if we get a Labour government, that this will be an important priority on the agenda. But getting a Labour government, that's a story for another day. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Andy. Very interesting and concerning as well. Feel free, everyone, to put questions in the chat if you think you might not remember them until the end of all the speakers. I'm going to go to our next Andrew. We have two Andrews here today. Andrew Ryder. Could you first, Andrew, give us a couple of sentences about your involvement with these issues, and then introduce the first Roma activist speaker for us?
Okay, thank you, Anne. Seeing Andy again brought back some very good memories. I'm sure Andy will remember that day because it was special for me. Just after he got elected to Parliament in 2005, we went to a site called the Westway in the area of his constituency. And I remember in the taxi, there was Rodney Bickerstaff and Julie Morgan. And
Lord Avery. And Eric Lubbock, Lord Avery, was he there?
Yeah, Lord Avery, the Liberal, was there as well. Basically, one of my jobs in the old days, going back, 20 years, was to act as a researcher to the all-party parliamentary group. And one of the things I really liked, actually, was there were MPs from all the different parties committed to this issue who did work together. A lot of Labour MPs. Now there are Scottish and Welsh nationalists who are active. Liberals like Lord Avery, and there are even some Conservatives like Tim Boswell, and it's so long ago I can't remember the name now, the one who set up the all-party group. So that was something I did in the past. I loved that cross-party work for a really important cause. And I'm very pleased to be able to introduce to you tonight a couple of people I've worked with very closely over the years. One is Katalin Rostas, former student of mine at the Corvinus University in Budapest, a star student no less, because she got a place at the very prestigious Central European University in Vienna. And not only that, she is a published sociologist, because she helped edit and produce an edited interview for a book myself and Marius Taba recently published. I'll just tell you a bit about Marius Taba. Dr. Taba is a former grants monitor at the Roma Education Fund, a major international Roma NGO. He's a published author. He's now working for the National Health Service in Doncaster, and he's a director of Friends, Families and Travellers, a lead UK NGO that Andy Slaughter mentioned earlier. The other speaker that I know, and I've been asked to introduce, is Nicu Stoica, who I understand and I've heard of before this meeting. I've heard about his very important work doing human rights monitoring in Romania, and now he's standing as a Labour candidate in Newcastle, which is absolutely fantastic. And it's great to see two really well-known Roma activists in Central Eastern Europe now in the UK, where they can work, I'm sure, not just for the Roma community, but gypsies and travellers and other minority groups in the UK. Our final speaker from Macedonia, I don't know him, but maybe he can introduce himself later. So Katalin, I don't know if you'd like to say a few words to us about what you've been up to.
Yes, first of all, thank you for the opportunity for being here. Because many of us, I've been related to the Roma issue, let's say, by birth. But actively, I have been working with Roma NGOs since my university years. And at the moment, I'm a mentor of Roma students taking part in a scholarship program, which helps in studying and supporting them with a stipend. I was thinking of many things much that I talk about here, because there are so many things which are not working in Hungary, since I'm coming from Hungary. And I was thinking of two major things that are, I think, international in a way that it is an issue everywhere. Well, one of them is education, obviously. The other issue, which I think comes from within, is political representation. Not surprisingly, segregation is still a thing in Hungary. As of now, as we know, there are at least 500 schools that are being segregated unofficially. Let's say these schools are supported by the government. They get fundings from the European Union money, let's say. And it is well known, and the number of these schools are growing. One of the recent cases that reached international attention as well happened to be last year, which we call the Gyöngyös case. I had the chance to interview with one of the main activists in Hungary, János Setét, who organized a protest against an action that was made after the court decision, which granted almost 100 million forints. I don't know how much is it in euros, but almost 100 million forints to Roma children, 19 Roma children who were segregated in this little town. And this court decision got an appeal, and it was in front of a Supreme Court decision when the Prime Minister made a following statement, and I'm going to quote this. The ruling violated the nation's sense of justice. Of course, if someone is ethnically ranked in a class, it is obviously segregation, but let's say that classifying someone on the basis of their capacity for education, their capacity to absorb knowledge, this is not segregation, but catching up. And by saying this before the court decision, it was obvious that as a Prime Minister, he suggested an outcome for the final decision for granting this compensation to the students. That is why this major activists organized a protest. And since this issue became not just a Roma issue, but an issue that would violate the whole judiciary system, which would violate those things that are important for the majority as well, we could arrange a protest that was significant since more than 30 years now. And this was the only significant event and something that was related to Roma that actually could become such a movement that achieved goals. And that is what we are missing from the recent politics. So how these two is really connected, education and political representation, that usually Roma people are not aware of their situation, of their disadvantaged position on a higher level. I mean, on a daily basis, they know that, yeah, maybe my skin color is different and I am not smart, or let's say they think I'm stupid. But on a higher level, people usually don't understand what does it mean to have a representation. We have a representation, and I would like to put in a quotation mark, because this representation is saying with the word of this major activist, János Setét, is a puppet, has a puppet role in our society. They are assisting a government that sometimes openly talks against their own people, I would say like this. So the lack of education leads to lack of representation, which is, I think, the current major issue of Hungarian Roma. Thank you.
Thank you, Katalin, for that. Should we move to Marius now? Dr. Taba, please.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts or to address a couple of words to such an important audience. I take the opportunity to thank a member of the parliament, Slaughter, in his tireless involvement in the debates inside the parliament and outside. And you have greetings and recognition from the staff of family, friends and traveler, the FFT staff, inform me how important it was your cooperation and how you steer around the forces in the political arena. And this being said, it's pushing me towards the first point that I wanted to share with you. And first of all, it is that although in the literature or in the vernacular on the political agenda, sometimes Roma are portrayed as a problem, and most likely or more often they are portrayed as a social problem. I think that this is a space and momentum to talk about Roma as a political object and subject, because usually portraying Roma as being the last or at the outskirts of the society, that they are coming all the time to ask the support of institutions, to claim something. I think that in the political arena, the lens, how to view or how to understand Roma should be switched to a potential, that Roma can be contributors. Roma might have a place, very determined one, in the new democratic game. And here I'm saying new because all of us, we know that Europe currently is passing a very important crisis. We know that the neoliberalism, it's heading around the European institution and they are gaining terrain in front of the left. I do believe that Roma as a political subject and object, it fits perfectly with the left politics. And I think in the balance of the democratic game, if Roma are taken as an ally, they might bring to this balance, to this equilibrium of the political forces in Europe. And here, it's bringing me at the second point that I wanted to make. As Europe is in the crisis, the phenomenon that Mr. Slaughter presented to us as a legislative action that it's targeting directly a certain group from the society, it's happening in different countries. My work and my research give me the opportunity to travel and to do research in more than 15 countries. And now I wanted to bring to your attention a couple of similarities, or if you want to put it like that, how it's cross-country, the situation of Roma. And I have to tell you that the UK situation is not singular. And especially during the last crisis of COVID-19, the securitization, the involvement of a state institution like army, like police and gendarmerie, tackle and look at the Roma community in a different way. And here it's coming in my mind the example of Bulgaria, where an army general was assigned to deal with the Roma community during the pandemic peak. However, we have in my country of origin, in Romania, the police forces looking and having some violence acts towards Roma. Some of them, they reach the national media, but there are a lot of them reported by the people from the field, what we are calling the human rights monitor. And the last point that I wanted to make, it is that indeed there is a time for having more alliances. There is a potential in the Roma community that would be win-win situation for the politics. We indeed need Roma young people to be involved in the politics, but we learn something from other parties. We don't want tokenism. If we start a partnership, it should be bottom up. And by the way, this is not in this talk. In our projects of research together with Andrew Ryder and other fellows of ours, in the last years, we have demonstrated that there is data and potential for having a new reform about Roma, Gypsy and travelers from the bottom up, that there is need to go back there into the grassroots and to try to identify the community resources, to mobilize them, and little by little to involve them as an equal party. I'm saying this because in some countries, like Slovakia, we do have a token politician, and in the last pandemic, it was the Roma politician that actually was put by his party to communicate the racist actions against Roma communities from Slovakia. Him as a token politician, he actually allegedly under the prioritizing of Roma community, they actually succeeded to label Roma communities as a disease spreader and as a risk for the other communities. And the last point that I wanted to make is to thank my colleague, Nicu Stoica, who had the courage to join your party, and maybe he would tell us some of his experiences and some of the needs that people at the grassroots are facing. And the last point, it's also related with some acts that are happening here, and Mr. Slaughter should know that actually there are some hidden action of returning some of the Romanian and Eastern Roma people that they committed some small petty crimes. And another legislative measure that it's already functioning, it's the returnee policy, including 2,000 pounds to be given for the people from the European Union if they return home on the voluntary basis. My signals and data, it is that majority of the beneficiaries are Roma from Central and Eastern Europe. So I think we have to revisit this, and we have to look carefully what is the impact of this new suggestion and resources that are put by the UK government to return some of unwanted people from Eastern Europe. Thank you very much, and I'm here to learn from you, to exchange, and I'm very happy that political actors are asking us, researchers and activists, and more or less, to me, this is kind of a connection with the reality. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Marius. Over to you, Nicu.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's been a pretty hectic day today because it's the first day of our local campaign. So we've been very busy, but I didn't want to miss this opportunity to get to know you. It's fantastic that we have a CEE branch of the Labour Party, which I think is amazing. I'm going to speak a little bit about my background. As Andrew kindly introduced me, I have been a human rights activist in Romania. Me and Marius Taba, we have a long history together. He was the grant maker. He was working for the grant maker, and I was a grantee for Roma Education Fund. And we did some really good projects. One of them, the last one we did, was awarded at national level for innovation in regards to combating segregation of Roma children in Romanian educational system, which was a problem, still is. So we worked at the grassroots, trying to combat discrimination, trying to improve the situation of Roma. It was really interesting, but after many years of working, we realized that the political influence is very strong, and we as an NGO, as a local NGO, working at the local level, we had a very difficult time because everything was politicized. There was nothing we could do. So eventually, I decided to move to UK. That was 9 years ago. To provide a better future for my family, for my daughter, because, like, for example, I was denied opening bank accounts and all sorts of discrimination, although I was educated and there was, I had all the rights. I was, very often, confronted with discrimination. We decided to move to UK 9 years ago. So we started from the bottom. It was a really interesting experience. I'm not going to tell you about this. So anyway, but my activism was still there, so I wanted to get involved. It was really difficult at the start because I didn't know how to get into politics. I knew my convictions and my principles are towards the Labour Party, but I wasn't sure how to get in. So I joined online. Like any other member of the Labour Party, but I didn't want to be just a member. I wanted to become an activist of the party. So I spent a whole year doing nothing because I didn't know where to go, where to start. Until I've managed to get in touch with some local activists. There were actually some councillors, and I told them, look, I want to get involved. What can I do? And they told me, oh, if you want, you can come and do some door knocking. I said, oh, that's interesting. I didn't do that before. So because in Romania politics, and you would know, most of you living in different parts of Europe, you would know that politics is very different. You don't see politicians going at people's door and knocking. And that was interesting. I said, oh, the councillors are going and door knocking. That's really interesting. So I started I was getting involved. So we did all those, canvassing sessions or campaigning. And I was, really involved with all the activities. So I wanted to use every opportunity to get like hands-on experience, to get to know people, to socialize. And I want to say that, it's been many years, 5 years since I've joined the Labour Party. It's not only that I've built like political and professional relationships. I have many friends in the Labour Party, so we are a family. We are the socialist family in Newcastle. Recently, I've been appointed the vice chair of the central CLP in Newcastle, which is an honor, and that tells that's a very clear message that Labour Party is not looking for token politicians like my colleague Marius said, but they really want Roma politicians to get involved and to be in key roles in the party. And also, I'm also a candidate, as Andrew introduced myself. I'm one of the candidates in a majority Labour ward. So our biggest concern at the moment is how to crush those stories. We're going to crush them. We have no doubt about it. But so I'm just going to give you a little perspective of the local politics, because I'm really involved in local politics. Of course, we are interested in what happens at the national level, what happens at the European level. And as my colleagues spoke, there are really, really important issues happening at the moment regarding Roma. But I'm also really interested. I'm very involved with the local politics, and one of our concerns during those elections is about the turnout to vote, because as you know, and as you would expect, this year, because of the pandemic, because of the current situation, we expect very low turnouts, and that would give the opportunity for the right wing and far right extremist parties to get some votes. Usually in an election in Newcastle, and most of you would know, Newcastle, it's a majority Labour council, but we would win by a very, very large gap with other parties, from other parties. But this year, the numbers also are showing that we're going to win. We are confident, but it still is going to be really interesting, because the turnout we expect to be lower than what would be normally be. So but of course we are trying, and I was going to say that involving the Roma community, and my efforts at the moment is to get the Roma community involved, because those a few hundred votes will matter in the big picture. Because of the low turnouts, if you mobilize the Roma community, we can overcome the number of votes that are going towards the right spectrum of the voters, and we expect some of the Labour voters to change their votes towards the far right or conservatives. But in this election, and that would be really interesting to see how the Roma vote. And when I say Roma, it's not only Romanian Roma, it's also the Czech and Slovak community, which are also significant in significant numbers in my ward where I'm standing as a candidate. So their votes will matter in a significant way, and that would be a clear message that we need to get Roma involved in politics, not only as candidates or politicians, but also as voters, because many of our residents don't know how to register to vote, don't even know they are eligible to vote in the local elections. They don't know how to ask for a postal vote, how to fill in the application. So we're doing all that at the moment, and it's a really difficult task, because we have to do this remotely, like on Zoom or using internet communication, obviously because of the social distancing. But also as of today, we can start campaigning. We also can go door knocking, and we can meet with different households. So it's a great day today. Also, we had a very lovely and sunny day today in Newcastle, so we are all happy with that. In case you've missed the British summer, anyway. So yeah, I mean it's been a very interesting journey as a member of the Labour Party. I'm so grateful for being welcomed by the local members, by the local branches, like just to give you another example, at the last meeting, the Central Newcastle CLP delegated me and my two other colleagues to be delegates at the national conference, which is an honor to represent our CLP. And but that also it's another indicator that Roma are welcome in the Labour Party. I don't know about other parties. I'm not really interested in other parties, but if any Roma would like to join any other party, it's still a plus, because we can have the voices of Roma activists that can, present, our point of view. And I would be really happy to have a high-profile Roma within the Tory party, which can, who can go and tell Priti Patel, look, you're disgusting. Whatever you're doing is not right. You should be stopping this, because you come from a migrant background as well, and you should, not forget where you're coming from, and stop being so, wicked. I would love to have a, Roma Tory in the party to stand up for the Roma, because, I am a labor activist, but I'm also a Roma. So we have to be the voice of, of the Roma. We have to be the voice of the disadvantaged ones. So it's, I mean, it's a privilege to be able to represent our residents. And one thing I would like to say, and I will end my speech. I'm not only representing the Roma, so I made that very clear in my campaign. I'm standing as a candidate to represent everyone, white British, Asians, Roma, I don't know, anyone who who lives here deserves to have a better opportunities, to have better aspirations. I'm standing, actually, it's one of the most disadvantaged wards in the country. Okay, so the level of child poverty, it's among the highest in the country. The infrastructure, it's worse than other parts of the city. Also, there's a digital divide. Just to give you an example, I was trying to switch my internet provider, and I got higher prices and lower speeds than what you would get if you are in a better off area of the city. And I think it's, and I'm a maths teacher, and I had to work from home, and I relied entirely on a good and a reliable internet connection, and I couldn't. So I couldn't, I couldn't do my job properly. I couldn't service my my community. I couldn't, do my teaching online, because in that part of the city, the infrastructure, it's poorer than in other parts of the city, and I shouldn't be. And I'm standing to speak about all this, and to generate a change in our communities, and also to be an inspiration for other Roma politicians who want to get involved. And I advise everyone who's not a Labour member to join the party, because this is the party that stands for what is right. We are the ones who are fighting for the disadvantaged ones. We are the voice of the voiceless. So yeah, just if you know anyone who has a a vocation for politics, tell them to join. If you haven't joined, please join the party. You can join online very easily, and I'm sure you'll be welcomed by everyone in the party. So I'll stop here for now. If you have any questions, feel free to do so. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Nicu. I think it's really important to all of us who've been members of the Labour Party for a long time to know that the party is welcoming you into its fold. And I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about your work and Marius Taba's in the near future. Thank you. Let's go to Semran from Macedonia. Semran, we've not met before, but I know Macedonia very well. I've been there many times for Roma Education Fund work. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your situation, what your activism you're involved in?
Hello, everyone. My name is Semran Sulejman, and I'm coming from Macedonia, North Macedonia now officially. So I'm coming from Skopje, and I actually live in the only Roma municipality which has a Roma mayor in Shutka. Basically, my education background is that I'm currently a student at Justinianus Primus, which is the law faculty in Skopje. But I also was part of the 2019-2020 cohort of RGPP, which is a program from CEE. When I was finishing this CEU RGPP program in my final thesis or research paper, I was talking about unregistered Roma, or actually a Roma who don't have proof that they have citizenship. So I want to kind of talk to you about this Roma issue in Macedonia, because actually, if Roma who have citizenship are discriminated, people who are stateless or are at risk of statelessness and are Roma are even more discriminated. So what I wanted to mention to you is that this issue of Roma who are not registered in the birth registry is an issue that came about after the fall of Yugoslavia. And actually, many Roma, not just in Macedonia, but in the neighboring countries such as Kosovo, Montenegro, Serbia, are having this problem of having Roma who don't have no kind of citizenship, because after the creating of these independent countries, many of them were not. They did not actually gain citizenship because of lack of documentation, because of homelessness, etc. So actually, when it comes to Macedonia, this problem wanted to be resolved with a new law, which was proposed last year, and it was called the Law on Unregistered People, in which these people were actually, there was a call in which these people signed up in order to get some kind of rights in order to establish a citizenship. I was actually doing research regarding this, and I found out that actually this law, it's not something that would, I mean, yes, it gives them some kind of rights and some options to have, especially during this pandemic, but it's not resolving their problem, which is not being registered in the birth registry, and without having all the rights that a citizen could get. So, but I want also to define what is unregistered people. It's actually people who are living in the territory of Macedonia, but they don't have a kind of proof of that they have relevant links to the state, because they're not documented. But at the same time, with that, there are people who are actually living like many years here. Some of them are coming from Kosovo, which was after the conflict, but some of them are actually people who are from Macedonia, but after the fall they did not get citizenship because of a lack of information, etc. So I was also mentioning this issue because also during this pandemic, these people still did not get these rights that this new law on unregistered people wanted to provide, or said that they would provide. Many of these things are still as the problem why they don't have citizenship, and it's because of the bureaucracy that it's created in Macedonia, but it is also because many of these people who are not registered and then don't have citizenship are Roma. So there is around 750 people who are unregistered, and during this pandemic, they're kind of more in risk than even the Roma who do have citizenship. So I wanted also to pinpoint that actually this law gives them only 5 enumerated rights, which is like right to education, healthcare, social protection, employment, and compulsory social insurance. Like these rights are needed, especially during this pandemic. But we also have problem with Roma who do have citizenship, but because of this situation where they need to learn online, they don't have electricity or they don't have internet access, they're kind of they could not obtain this right to education. So that is what it's currently the problem, the biggest problem in Macedonia, having lack of economic resources in order to get education, online education during the pandemic. Many organizations actually donated. I think also REF was here involved in giving tablets to Roma families which were which didn't have these devices in order to follow their online classes, but many other Roma, including these unregistered people, still cannot have access to education. But besides access to education, an issue for the Roma in Macedonia is also the access of healthcare. As Roma who do have citizenship, as well as unregistered Roma, also have problems with having health insurance, but also they have problems with access to health. So currently in Shutka, for example, what is the problem is that our ambulance, which provides healthcare for 50,000 people, which predominantly are Roma, we have a problem that recently, actually, many doctors went to they're retired, so many of them don't have others doctor that will replace them, because many doctors don't want to have I would say they don't want to have relations in general with Roma, but still they don't want also to give healthcare to Roma. So I think in this pandemic, that would be the main issue of Roma, of Roma in Macedonia, healthcare, but as well education or access to education. So if you have any questions, be free to ask.